Okay, hello, good morning from Greece. We are connected in different time zones with the entire world today. So I would say good afternoon, good morning to all our participants and our distinguished speakers. My name is Mantalena Kaili, representing the ELONTech, the European Law Observatory on New Technologies, and I welcome you to the second part of the dialogues on digital identity discussions that we have organized with Rob van Kranenburg from the IoT Council the last couple of months as a continuity of the initial event that took place online on June with the collaboration of the STOA Committee of the European Parliament, where as well institutional and officials and experts and scientists joined our discussion and had quite interesting insights. So we thought that we should keep it going, this dialogue. And last month, we hosted another webinar, and this is the second. And this is how it will be until this awkward year leaves. We leave it behind. So I would say that it's a quite special way to celebrate the 31st of August. If it was a different year, we would be all sad. But now, I don't know if I express your feelings as well. Let's finish with the summer as well and get on back to work properly in autumn. So I welcome you all. Our participants are also from all over the globe. And I would like to give the floor, and also I should mention that to our participants that you can ask questions and leave your comments on the column on the right of your screen so that we can read them to our speakers. So with no further ado, I would like to welcome, of course, my partner to all these webinars, Mr. Rob van Kranenburg from the IoT Council, Miss Jenny Davis from the School of Sociology from the University of the National University of Australia, and Kohei Karan from Japan. He's Kurihara, who is the data privacy CMO, president of the Tokyo chapter at the Government Blockchain Association. With Mrs. Tatiana Revoredo from Brazil, lawyer and blockchain specialist. So let's see how her connection goes. Rob, you have the floor, and thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Mantalena. Yes, as you mentioned, we are having this series as we kickstarted in the European Parliament and STOA, and it's also in the context of the Next Generation Internet, the NGR Forward Strategy project, giving input on topics to European policymakers. And so we're very happy to basically sort of have a journey across the globe today. So we span the entire globe because, of course, identity is quite a horizontal topic. It's concerning all of us. It's kind of the kind of a way to think about essences or beginnings in very, very fluid times. And so we kickstart the first session with Jenny Davis, and I think she's going to talk about her book that's just out, and I hope she's going to talk about that because it's tremendously interesting. And just briefly give a little bit of context, I think Jenny's talk is sort of a kind of a theoretical framework that sort of is below the question of identity as such, because we may think about identity as some kind of monolithical, some kind of essential thing, because that's some kind of process, but it's actually a process, and this process has a number of building blocks. And as we go into the 21st century, we're finding this on different layers. So on a more mundane, superficial layer, where we have the relationship of identity now with us as human beings, only partly being something that we present, but foremost, or becoming to be foremost, our relationship with objects and how these objects actually perceive us, or shadow us, or proactively actually think that we're going to do things and do things. So that's one kind of layer on which Jenny's work is very necessary. But there's another layer, which I think is a more deep layer or a more theoretical layer, which takes us to the very notion of our relationship with objects and things, and how we may have forgotten that the affordances, as I think you will discuss, are actually in themselves something that we may need to reassess or rethink. So I'm going to stop rambling now. And so, Jenny, you want to? Yes, please.
Thank you, Rob. So, hi, everyone. I'm Jenny Davis. I'm from the School of Sociology at the Australian National University. And thank you for that. Thank you for organizing this. I think this is a really interesting and important topic. And I'm actually quite interested to hear what my co-panelists have to say. So I'll get through mine as quickly as possible. And I also appreciate that this is probably lunch hour for a lot of people. So with that time sensitivity in mind, I did write up some remarks. And as Rob mentioned, I'll be talking about my new book today, but I have tried to kind of ground it in a broader discussion about identity, of course, and the thematic question for this panel: can we choose our identity? So with that, I'll just jump into it. And also, so what we've seen is with digitization, there's been a newfound freedom to express identity, to express ourselves, and at the same time, the inescapable reality of extrinsically imposed identification. That is, we can say who we are, we can find communities, artifacts, and objects to support our identity claims, and with these, we can enact the selves that we wish to be. At the same time, every click and every tap becomes a data point. And with these data points, we're profiled, packaged, delivered to third parties, and returned to ourselves in the form of targeted advertisements, autocompletes, account suspensions, and recommendations for music, film, relationships, and information. So both of these stories, these expressive freedoms and these imposed identifications, are fostered by the same socio-technical systems: the hardware, the software, the algorithms and code that infiltrate the mundanities of daily life. And so today, what I'll suggest is that we can fruitfully think about these technologies, these hardware, software, algorithms, and code, and all of their simplicity and complexity through the lens of affordances, as Rob mentioned. So affordances are how the design of technologies affect human behavior in kind of the simplest sense. They refer to the way technical features push, pull, enable, and constrain. As Rob mentioned, I've recently written a book on this topic, available now, published with MIT Press. So it's just come out this month. Sorry, I got excited about the book. So I recently wrote this book. And so what I do in the book is I introduce a framework that provides vocabulary for this pushing and pulling, for these opportunities and constraints brought forth by the design of technical systems. The framework that I introduce in the book is called the Mechanisms and Conditions Framework, which I'll talk about in just a second. But the sort of underlying premise is that the social effects of technical features are not binary or universal, but variable and relational. Or what I mean by that, in simpler terms, is that technologies shape behavior, but they do so with varying degrees of force. And these variations will differ between different people, and they'll differ as people engage or encounter technologies under different circumstances. And so the Mechanisms and Conditions Framework, which I introduce in the book, gives conceptual structure to these variations. And in particular, the mechanisms of affordance, so the mechanisms part of this model, the mechanisms of affordance, are how technologies affect us, how they, and the language that I give to that is how they request, demand, encourage, discourage, refuse, and allow social actions. The conditions of affordance, which is sort of the second part of the model, are how these mechanisms vary across subjects and circumstances, differentiated into perception. Does the person know the features, know what the features are and what they do? Dexterity, does the person have the capacity to functionally operate a given feature or feature set? And cultural and institutional legitimacy, is the person supported in their use of a technology and its various functions? Concretely, what that means is that a request for you may be a demand placed upon me. What you're allowed, I may be refused. And this framework is broadly applicable from pencils to smart cars, right? And I'll ask today that we think through affordances and in particular the mechanisms and conditions framework of affordances with respect to identity and choice. How do the digital technologies of everyday life afford personal expression on the one hand and impose extrinsic identification on the other? For whom and under what circumstances? So the first thing to assume is that by default, everything you do on the internet is tracked. Everything you do on your phone also tracked. And of course, everything you do with a smart device is tracked, right? In fact, these devices are only smart because they track. That's what makes them smart. So what this means is that from the start, our tools of engagement, that which allow and encourage convenience, expression, and social connection, also entrap us through our data, refusing anonymity and demanding identification. However, this default is not inevitable. The savvy user may utilize proxy servers, enable privacy protections, confuse the system by inputting contradictory data. Those who are so inclined and sufficiently skilled may therefore shift the demand of imposed identification into a request. They may allow themselves anonymity that by default was refused. However, again, these maneuvers are not equally or universally available. One may not know about privacy settings or proxy servers. They may use them wrong. They may think they've turned off their tracking, but in fact are being tracked through their networks. Someone may live in a country that disables privacy protections or opens access to personal data. For instance, internet use in Europe offers a different set of affordances than that which is offered in the US, both of which differ from both structurally, legally, and experientially from that which is available in the affordances that operate when browsing the web in China. So across contexts and circumstances, what we see are the opportunities for expression butting up against data exhaust. As people identify themselves and leave behind data traces, there are varying capacities for sort of personal expression on the one hand and extrinsically imposed identification on the other. So just kind of wrap this in a nice relatable package. I'll make it personal. And then I'll tell you what it's like for me, an American, to Google in Australia. So you might tell from my accent, I'm not actually Australian. I've been here for about 4 years now. I'm still learning to Google. So if I do nothing but open a search bar, I find Googling in Australia sort of frustrating, and I have since I got here, right? So I have American sensibilities, and when I search for things, I expect my search results to reflect this. They do not. My queries return Australian cultural products, local news, and centigrade temperatures. These are often not what I'm looking for, and it's somewhat disorienting to be misclassified in this way. So in order to Americanize my search, I'll do things like use proxy servers or reset my location. This helps. But then on the other hand, sometimes I do want to search local. I want to know the best place to go out for breakfast. I want to learn about a parliamentary debate, or I want to link up with other Australian or European academics that would be relegated to page 2 or further in American search results. So what I do is I toggle, again, off the proxy server and back to local settings. This toggling is effective, but only kind of. The system identifies me still as one singular thing, as an either or, when in fact I'm a both and. The system thus refuses my hybrid identity and demands singular national identification. I can navigate this system to allow for my varied needs, but it's an effort of retrofitting and always imperfect. I can get around system demands, but it still requests that I be either Australian or American. In this context, I have to actively assert my multifaceted self through a system that, in its design, misclassifies me at base. So, moving back to the thematic question of this webinar, can we choose our identity? I offer in conclusion an unsatisfying academic response. Sometimes, for some people, under some circumstances. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Jenny. I think well, there's a number of points, and we'll go to debate them afterwards, after all the talks. But I think one, I just want to quickly point out, I think is so important, because we're always sort of being told that technology is kind of neutral. Sort of, I think that's kind of the and I think your work really gives us very, very good arguments to show that that's not the case, and that actually it's these conditions of affordances that are negotiable, but somehow we as citizens, or we as end users, we don't really see that negotiability, and that negotiability is actually not offered, but it's also actually, I would say, clouded by this fact that when you sort of want to set that as a discussion or as a debate, people will say, "Oh no, the technology itself is neutral." So it's this constant kind of. Whereas I think with your work, it shows that it's actually negotiable. So maybe just quickly, how can we start this negotiation as end users? Do you think is that something that you?
Yeah, well, I think that's a really difficult and important question. Sorry, I'm getting a bit of an echo. Is that coming through to you as well, or does it sound okay? Good. Okay. So I think that's a really important question. I think probably thing number one is to acknowledge that technologies, for all of us to acknowledge at base, technologies are political. And by that, I mean, they operate in ways that reflect and reinforce existing structures of access, power, and inequality. And I think and there's been a whole lot of work, that's not coming from me, that's an assumption I'm building on a lot of really excellent work from other critical scholars of technology. And I think if we begin with that basic assumption that technology is not neutral, that it's designed in ways that have values, and that those values will advantage some people over others, then I think we can understand the technology as, at its foundation, pliable. It was built one way, but that way isn't natural or inevitable. And we should think about whose values are represented and how we might redesign to be more equitable, more accessible, and sort of more fair broadly.
And the argumentation of the mechanisms and the condition actually gives a very good framework for that. So we're all going to have to study it and learn how to work with it. So that's definitely. So thank you. So Kohai-san, are you? So we have a perspective from Japan. So Kohai-san, I would say it's the floor is yours.
Sure. Thank you for inviting the great opportunities. It's very pleased to have a conversation to all of you that join this on this conference. So I want to introduce myself. For that, can I share the screen? Okay. Yes. So you can see all this presentation of mine. Is it okay? Yes. So you can see that.
Yes, perfect.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a brief introduction of mine. My name is Kohei Kurihara from Japan. I'm being involved in some of project related to the blockchain, data privacies, the data-driven societies. I think data is a key part of the elements to accelerate the societies and the industries, especially human-based identity is a key part on the digital economy. So that's why I'm working on the space, the many activities are doing that. So we had started this new activities. The name is the Privacy by Design Lab. The Japan is the country where we have studied the new Privacy Act from 2022. Of course, you have started the GDPR or other data protection regulation, which is the new story of industries. This is a turning point for identity management as well. So that's why we are very excited to teach the industries understanding the points of data privacy, the identity space. So this is the basic reasons why I started this kind of the new things. So we have a vision, a mission, and a purpose. We are visioning the circular societies. The people is connected, the inclusions. This society is the primary things for us. I think on the digital economies, the privacy is the key parts. However, we were missing piece before. That's why we try to cooperate with some stakeholders to organize the best efforts based on the privacy protected on the digital economy. So identity is the key part of the elements to express itself as well as to prove itself on the digital societies. Our goal is focusing on the more data privacy driven societies based on the digital economies. From the human being perspectives, we are living on digital, we are connected to several things through the identities. In that sense, how we can produce the privacy protected the environments for the safety data management. I've been working on the data space. This is the very primary things. However, we have a very big gaps in between the individuals, the enterprises. To fill these gaps, we will make more great society based on the digital identity in the futures. So we are working on the consulting service for these solutions. R&D, the corporate transformation is a key part of the things because the company is publishing digital identities. However, this identity is not based on the privacy protected. This kind of the identity is not a safety for the human being and individual. So we approach from the corporate side to be protected. The once you produce the identities, you need to be free understanding the points of the data privacy. This kind of the project is the focusing areas to make it a more affluent society in the futures. So these are very basic things they're working on right now. So these parts is themselves. And we also seeking a more open source style, the knowledge sharing, the proponents where the people, the company can easy to correct in some failures, a good case. These are knowledge sharing ecosystem in terms of privacy protections, the best efforts for the digital identities. Before, there is no specific platform. What kind of the identity is the best? What kind of digital proveness is the best? So I think open source based approach is very effective for the enterprises to run about the best efforts to do the business on the digital societies in between the communication, the consumers and capitals, the other stakeholding. These kind of the components will help these companies to go to the privacy protected, the digital identity utilities, which is our aim in the society in the futures. So we build some communities to communicate it, what kind of the identities, privacy is the best efforts for the futures. We do some meetups, the communications, some stakeholders such as the Japanese government agencies is working on this space, or other security companies are doing that. Besides, I'm a part of the digital identity company. We developed some solutions for the enterprises to free comply with the data protections. and I'm working on the privacy expert community, where we had some interviews that publish to increase the knowledge of the importance of data privacy and the identities. Yeah, so these things is a basic introduction of mine. From the perspective of digital identity, I think we need to take a balances in between the data privacies and future identity. So that's why I'm very excited to focusing on the blockchain is one of a great solution for the identity space.
Thank you, Clarissa. And maybe just one quick question, and then we go to Tatiana. Instead of self-sovereign identity, how does this relate to basically what we've seen here? Is that something you're also working on?
Yes, we try to develop the solution based on the self-sovereign identity concept. In the processes, the blockchain is the one of the options, but it's not perfect because the self-sovereign is based some of the principles. The CRISPR-RN has been published on the W3C, where we try to examine what kind of the self-sovereign acceleration is the best fit for the individual, the enterprise in between, because from the enterprise side, they want to collect a lot of the data to access it in the customer communications. However, self-sovereign based, the concept is just to minimize the data from the individual. We try to balance these gaps from the enterprise perspective, the individual things. We try to explore the best effort, the best solutions to communicate each other right now.
Thank you very much. Tatiana, are you with us from Brazil? I think it's quite early at the moment.
Yeah, 7 a.m.
Yeah, I think it's Japan is around 8. So so we basically, again, we span the globe. So Tatiana, the floor is yours.
Okay, I'll try to be quick. As more associated people, devices, and personal data go online, there is an increasing focus on one essential element of this new digital environment, our identities. The ability to prove that we are who we say we are is more and more determining for our opportunities of establishing trust in each other and make significant interaction in the digital economy. However, we are still learning what identity in a digital world means. How could we develop policies and practices regarding the best way of collecting, processing, and using data, or how to do this without violating people, freedom, or causing them any harm. So it is worth highlighting the fact that when thinking about digital identity, we need to see it more widely. Digital identity is the total sum of all attributes that exist upon us in the digital world, an ever-growing or evolving collection of data points. For example, our behavior on social media, our profile in apps online, what each of us consider privacy, what we like to buy on the internet, among others. So in countries in development, the main facts of our civil life, birth, marriage, death, are used to be registered in a notary office and complemented by other documents issued by multiple government departments with the function of identifying the same person before different legal facts. Now, speaking quickly about Brazil, the identity system here is mostly analog and quite fragmented. Some negative points are the biometric civil identification are not unified in the country, but Brazil does not have an integrated registry. The civil registry is a statewide attribution, not federal. and we are a big country. The reason why each one of the 23 states has its proper regulation, its level of maturation. Nevertheless, digital identification has advanced in Brazil. Brazil is one of the few countries where the state has created an infrastructure of public keys. Another positive point is that besides the digital signature, the Brazilian method also allows checking the expiration date of the signature and the integrity of the documents. Furthermore, Brazil has been preparing to launch its national service of digital identity and has advanced in schedule of data interoperability. So Brazilian states now are currently being evaluated and prepared for the implementation of this national digital identification. And it is expected that the digital identification in Brazil will be thoroughly implemented in 2021, but I don't know, after this pandemic. In addition, an interesting example of an identity solution has been developed in Brazil by CPQD, a Research and Development Center in Telecommunications here. It uses the concept of decentralized digital identity. So here is important to clarify that according to the concept of self-sovereign digital identity, the owner, the holder of the digital identity is responsible for the control of management of your data. And that includes not only basic personal data, but also information about your relationships with other people, companies, and even things. It is the user in control of their data, which is in line with the objective of data protection laws here in Brazil and also GDPR. But going back to our example, the digital identity innovative solution here has been developed within the Laboratory of Financial and Technology Innovation, a collaborative and virtual initiative coordinated by the Central Bank of Brazil. The proof of concept of the new solution, which was named FIN-ID, and the centralized digital identity system, was completed in November. And the final report of this work, this paper, was published in last March. So according to this concept, the owner of the digital identity is responsible for the control and management of your data, which is compatible with the Brazilian general law, which comes into force in August, last week. And the centralized digital identity is composed of several electronic credentials issued by different participating identifiers, also called agents, that are part of a blockchain network. So FIN-ID enables the implementation of this project, and as it gives the user control and management access to their data, the concept was created to secure identity layer of people, individuals, and companies, and things on the internet. So I think this is a great example in Brazil that we have about digital identity. So that's it.
Thank you very much, Tatiana, and that's indeed extremely interesting. And so this FIN-ID is actually now operating. So you can actually, because it's coming from the bank, so it's this fintech thing kind of situation, but it's extremely forward-looking if we compare it at the moment with other places in the world.
Concept. Now all the tests has finished, and probably it will be implemented by the November of 2020 and during 2021. because we are launch here I don't know if you have heard about Pix, that it's a new financial system in Brazil, trying to avoid for now the CBDs, the digital currency of central banks. So they are implementing this Pix before we are going to a digital currency of central bank. So that's why this project came now.
Yeah, but it seems to have quite a coherent and connected vision on basically the new emergent space of this technology, of this identity framework. And maybe just a few words on where is this coming from? Sort of where is this coherence? Because it also needs a lot of coherence between the ministries, I would assume. So where did this vision originate that actually now gives you these quite forward-looking tools? If you can say something about it.
This is a project of the CPQD, that it's research central in telecommunications here in Brazil. It's an idea that is built with the Central Bank of Brazil and government. So I cannot tell you more details, but I think it's going to be working on until 2021.
Yeah, well, we're very keen to find out more about it. That's for sure. So we'll be in touch on this. There's
sure.
A question. Thanks. There's a question, Jenny. I think there's a question in the chat. Federico Bonelli is asking this. So can we better frame privacy? And I'm asking this to you because it seems to imply, like you also said, that we basically are facing this world in which the tracking itself is part of the successful design of the whole of everything. It's actually what's defining the entire digital transition. So coming with some sense of trying to escape from that, building tools to get away from that, actually, I would say, is not a course that is, it's basically a marginalizing yourself course, because the whole ship is moving in this one direction. So we basically need an imaginary to take over the entire ship. That's kind of the thing that we are basically trying to look for. And then we have to basically accept this kind of world in which everything is tracked and traced and traceable and digitally addressable, and we are sort of becoming entities in all of that. And instead of lamenting that, we've got to work with that. And so we've got to start asking different questions. And I think also your framework is very apt and very productive to ask these new questions, considering the fact that we accept that this is the kind of environment in which we're in. If that's the case, then the question that Federico asks kind of makes a lot of sense, because you then say, maybe we frame privacy as a kind of maximum allowed level of granulation, granulation in data gathering to build models of society. What would you say to a question like that?
Yeah, thanks. That is a thinker. So really quickly, I think one thing that would be helpful is to kind of put it back on the ground a little bit, where we see an empirical example of this very tension, where on the one hand, our aggregate data is what makes something function, and on the other hand, our giving access to that data becomes worrisome. And what do we do with that? And I think a really relatable example to all of us is COVID tracking apps, right? So there's been these introductions for large scale operations that track our movements, different technologies in different countries and different regions, but technologies that attach to our phone, that attach to our bodies, that keep track of where we are and who we're with. And this is beyond convenience, right? So this is for public good and public health, and at the same time, it puts public privacy at risk and personal privacy at risk. And so I think that particular example is where we see this tension play out quite acutely. At a personal level, I've gone back and forth quite a bit about sort of what to make of it and sort of how to best go about it. But I think it speaks to this larger point where, in which our individual data matters for privacy, but what matters more in terms of the politics of control and the politics of power is that our data aggregate. So it's not just that you have data about me, but that you have data about all of us together. And having data about all of us together makes us watchable, trackable, and able to be influenced. So we, as sort of a society, become accessible to outside forces who have generally political and economic agendas. And so what do we do with that? I'm not sure. I'm not sure. Yeah, but I think that I think that something like the affordance is the mechanisms and conditions framework, where we say, okay, well, so how do these socio-technical systems enable, constrain, how do they request or demand or refuse access to the self, control over individual autonomy, and at the same time, how do they request and demand things like public safety and convenience and functionality? I've avoided the question mostly just then. Give some ways to think around it, I think.
Well, that's of course. That's not unknown of academics to do that. But that's actually it's not what you did. I think exactly the framework. It gives us an opportunity to discuss this balance between also the fact that all this aggregated data can give me very good insights into my own behavior. It can give me very good insights into how I'm resource allocated in my home or in larger things. So it's not the fact that it's aggregated in itself that may be a problem. It's just that a few people are looking at the moment, and what they are seeing is not being seen as negotiable or negotiated, which exactly is the framework that you kind of bring in that allows us to do that. Because this is the kind of balance I think that we want to reclaim also with this notion of identity or self-sovereign identity, as it's called. And there's a question in the chat, Kohay-san. It's a little, and it's also a little bit about the blockchain. That in the space and of identity, it may be a bit difficult to have the blockchain as a kind of central, because I mean nothing gets lost on the blockchain also. So it's kind of a tension there with identity and self-sovereign identity. It's just that you want specific things on the blockchain, and you have to be very, very careful about what you put there. And would you reply to that?
Sure. Thank you for the questions. I think blockchain is not perfect. When you store your personal data on the blockchain, it's not compatible to the specific data protection law. In that cases, we need to be selective which personal data to be stored on the storage. I think our solution is to try to put your personal information onto a central servers or anywhere to be easy to like rectify or deletion. These parts needs to be easily to be aligned to the data protection law. On the blockchains, you and I are able to comprise free everything to the GDPR or any this other kind of the regulatory process. So in that cases, we need to pay attention to carefully the blockchain features. What's the difference from the centralized operation under the data protection laws? So we discussing with these topics with some other open source project. I'm a part of that, and the governance mechanism is very important to manage decentralized operation. For example, like you need authentication for the COVID-19 healthcare apps. You need to align with the centralized authorities such as healthcare ministries to prove the verified credentials. You need to align these parts. I think this is not a part of the blockchains, but your identity is decentralized. So I think the blockchain is the one of choice to realize this operation, but this is not just sole things. So yeah, that's why we need to consider what kind of approach you want to achieve through these tools. Yeah, this is my ideas.
Sorry. I think I can contribute with this.
Yes.
People are always asking about how can we, if blockchain is compatible with data privacy, data protection. But in fact, we have to think that we have many kinds of blockchains. You have permissionless, private blockchains, and there are technical solutions that can solve these questions about data protection and immutability in blockchains. Like we can use side chains and use a private blockchain with a public blockchain, and or put all the data out of blockchain in IPFS, for example. So technology has been answering these questions also, and of course we have to realize that many legislations are not considering that we are migrating from Web 2.0 to Web 3.0. So the law design is all about centralized model, but we are migrating to a decentralized model. So I think we have a long way to solve these things.
Yes, I think this is actually also picked up by, and we have great experts in the chat. That's actually fantastic, because I see Sten, Eric, and Stephen, who is one of the main experts and been working for a very long time on these topics in Holland. And Stephen is actually saying that a moral compass through social acceptance and reaching consensus about it through voting democracy may need the same granularity as the data required for collective profiling. In other words, agile laws or regulations or preconditions. So I think that really goes along what you were saying. That we need these laws. Actually, we need a new notion of regulation itself. In Holland, there's a faculty in Maastricht that's actually doing this, and it's a faculty about, I think it's called Technology and Law. And they're working on trying to make lots of, let's say, programmable type of situations. And but this is a topic in itself that we will address at some point, definitely. So just very quickly to go back to you, Kohai, because I think we talked about these COVID apps, and I think the situation at the moment is very strange, but it is kind of a horizontal moment in which we can see the reactions of different cultures towards these apps. At the same time, we also can see a quite horizontal big no, let's say, towards them from citizens. I think even in Singapore, only like 20% of all Singaporeans downloaded the app. I think in France it's 6% or 7%. So it's like this seems to be a tremendous distrust in this whole technological apparatus of people to put their private data and hence sort of in. And I saw that you are going to move to wisdom in your open source wisdom kind of framework. And that's fantastic, because we're sort of skipping knowledge there. We always seem to go from data to knowledge to wisdom, but you actually talk about wisdom. And is that a specific Japanese kind of way of framing things, you say? Because I think that's exactly what we need. We need to move towards a higher level of meaning in what we do.
Sure, thank you. We call the wisdom is just a kind of the sharing the knowledge to be a preventive. They're also the making a trust. I think trust is becoming very important to achieve the specific goal. You said the COVID-19 application. Japan, we had surpassing is almost 10 million downloaded, but the problem is they are not active using. So it's not working so well. In that case, you got infections. You need to give notifications to the proximities potential users who might be infected at once. These things is need to based on the trust to the government or app providers. So this open knowledge is the one way to prevent distrust your brand or your objective. If this open source platform is helping the companies or governments to acquire the knowledge, the failures, they can easy to put the specific directions where they don't have to go there. That's a part of our solutions to collect the knowledge aggregations to distribute it, the free access for the data controller to build up their trust instead of the compromise their operations. So if this could be the works, globally we can share the knowledge in between the different countries, the effects. When you started in the different cultures, it's very hard to free comply with that. So we can share these open knowledges in the different countries. We can be making a sell every business operations, even we have a different background. We explorations try to bridge in between through the knowledge and network base through these open platform.
There's a question that I would first like to put to Jenny and then to Tatjana, and that's a question by Stan Eric, and it's I think it's also about what we call custodianship, sort of in this new paradigm of SSI. So I think well, it's become clear, Jenny, that the framework that you've been thinking and working on has become very political. I mean, for us in the identity frameworks, that is very productive. But Stan Eric says that the role of the user and citizen as a curator of their own data must be expanded, and maximum local control in combination with secured access in data directories. I think we can sort of agree on that that's kind of the self-sovereign. But of course, the problem is that none of us is educated in self-sovereignty. None of us is educated in being autonomous, and we're not educating in actually, I mean, I think we have generally over 56, 70 passwords that all of us lose all the time. But if we lose our private keys to our own identity, we basically lose everything. So the key, of course, is we've got to educate ourselves into this new capability, or into these new. We've got to find a way to do that. And then, how do we do this theoretically? I think the framework that you bring is very important for that. But also, how do we do this practically, Tatjana? Because in the fintech, in the FinID kind of situation, what happens if I lose my keys? And where is this custodianship? And I think there's been ideas about having sort of friends and family being part of it, having some kind of trusted kind of companies or organizations being part of it. We must build some kind of a framework for this type of trust. So Jenny, maybe you want to kick off?
Okay, yeah. So Well, so I think that's a great point, and I think this idea of so the problem with why can't we all be curators of our own data is because even if it's technically possible, and I mean technical in the literal sense of the word, for many people it is that action, that self-ownership is still refused. And the reason it's refused is because I don't have the technical skill and capacity to understand the complexity of that system in a way that lets us understand what data is available, how it's used, and how we might control it ourselves. And so from a theoretical perspective, and I think Tatiana might be able to say if this is, how we would sort of put this into practice, but I think from a theoretical perspective, we would say, okay, so how do we design systems in which we don't just give people technical control, but it's user-friendly in a way that makes that control viable, that makes that ownership and autonomy viable. So how do we make really user-friendly, and assuming the user is coming from a diverse range of backgrounds? So how do we make something user-friendly to everybody so that the data systems are legible, they can see them and understand them, and manipulable? They can do things with the data, with their own data, really easily without any sort of technical expertise.
Jana, you want to maybe also follow up?
Yeah, I totally agree with Jenny. From technical perspective, we have multi-signature keys. That means you can have many people validating your private keys. So if you lost your private keys, maybe your mom and daddy or a friend could get it back. But of course, we need a behavior question here, mainly in Brazil, because digital illiteracy here it's really high. We are not like Europe and other countries, other regions in the world, because we need to solve this education thing that is really compromising our development, digital development. I think that's why World Economic Forum in 2018, when they were discussing about digital identity, one of the main topics that they elected as important to digital economy, it's the ID. So I think that's it. Yeah.
I want to thank you all for a very, very interesting discussion, I would say, and great lectures. We've got a lot of I see, yes, we got a lot of good things in the chat, and we'll be making some kind of report about this. We'll include everything in the chat and get back to you. And we're also going to ask people, I would say here, if they want to be on some kind of a list, so we can also get some discussion going there. For now, Mantalena, you want to conclude or say the session?
Oh, well, it's been a quite rich, fruitful discussion, and I thank you deeply for your contribution. We do have points and questions that we need to take into consideration, and I think every session that we organize, Rob, ends up to the point that we realize as a global community of users, we realize that we are exposed into something that we were not prepared, and now we need to identify ourselves, our self-position into this new reality, this new ecosystem, and it's an existential and so practical and issue, and I think we will have to accelerate and do this process quite fast, because as we can understand now through this COVID adventure, we will have to accept things before we will be asked whether we agree or not. We will have to accept things that will also consent, in times of crisis, that maybe it was the ultimate option that we had as, I don't know, country or humanity. But definitely having the insights from different countries, I keep on having in my head the filter of the cultural differences and the political differences. We are lucky, let's say, in Greece now we have a government that has a serene way of managing things. I cannot say that this is happening equally to other countries, as we can see. So it's crucial in times of crisis to have a moderate government that can also provide solutions and encourage innovation, and the policymakers take into consideration all these points of the intellectuals and the experts. Yes, by all means, this is a quite legal issue. It ends up to be quite legal, the foundation of this conversation. And I think even the lawyers should be trained on the parameters of the issue of a person being present online. It's like taking a car without being trained on a highway with no navigation or brakes or destination. The final point is that many years ago, I mean, the decade of the big financial crisis in Europe, we've been discussing whether it is just or fair to have these two-speed countries in the implementation of the goals of the European Union. Eventually, the question was, which is our destination? It doesn't matter the speed, but the destination regarding the financial targets. Maybe this could apply here as well. It doesn't matter through which process we tackle the issue of self-sovereign identity, but which is the end point? Where do we end up? What is the goal? And with which conditions we will feel, satisfied that we are socially responsible and intellectually honest. So anyway, many things more. We should have an open table, take on stage also our participants and also have an all-together discussion with the speakers that we had also at the previous conversation. So let's plan this for November, maybe?
Yes.
Okay. I personally thank you all. A lovely new September and autumn ahead. So thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. So thank you all again, and bye.
Thank you for having me.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye, Jenny. Bye.
Bye. Have a good
Thank
evening.
Bye.
you.
See you also.
Yeah.
Yeah, good evening.
See you.
Bye-bye.